Now, when I say work in the room, I mean any social gathering. It could be the bus, it could be at the train station, like who rides the train, but the metro or the airport, or it could be a social gathering, right? It could be your, Sigma Alpha sorority. It could, like soiree. It could be an awards banquet. Any group that is together that you would like to sort of mingle through and meet some people, or at least not be awkward when you do have to run in and talk to people. We're going to call work in the room. And there are some tips for this, like things that, will be helpful to you to know. Here are the first couple tips. Step one, joining the conversation. Never join a group of two because you don't know why they're together, the two of them, and so you may pop in on a couple that's fighting. You'd be like, hey, I'm Adam. Nice to meet you. Well, we were just talking about John's alcoholism. And then you have to back away slowly, and you can't really recover from that. So just know that you don't ever join a group of two. So you are shooting for 3 or more. And more is always a little bit better because the more people there are in the group, the less work that you have to do in terms of the heavy lifting in the conversation, right? If you pop into a group of 3, they're immediately going to turn to you and say, oh, hi, who are you? And there's going to be lots of questions about you. If you pop into a group of 5 or 6, they may, ask a little bit about you, but then they may go back to what they were talking about because there's more of them than there are of you. And that's easier on you. So that's a thing for you to know, that if you can join a group of 3 or more, and more being better. Now, you can also find the single person that's sort of, awkwardly by themselves. They may be as equally awkward as you and be glad to have somebody to talk to. You do want to make sure that they're not like on their phone or reading a book or looking really angry because they may be by themselves for a reason. But if it just looks like they are maybe struggling to find somebody to talk to, they may really appreciate you being able to talk to them. So when we say use nodding techniques here at the end, like this is really what we're saying is use nonverbal cues, right? Remember 55% of all communication is nonverbal. And what that means is that the way that you enter the group, your body language and your posture, the way that you, sort of nod and gesture displays that you are listening and are interested in what the people are saying. So be cognizant of that. Like whenever you go into the group, like don't just awkwardly stand there, stiff as a board because they're going to be like, who is this guy and why is he even here? Whereas if you come into the conversation and you're nodding along like you're following along, they think, oh, he at least is interested and gets us. Cool. So now we can use what we call the R method, A-R-E. And this is sort of a way to get a conversation started in a group where you maybe don't know them and it's sort of an unfamiliar situation. And so the first step is called anchoring. And basically, if you don't know anything about these people that you're walking into, the one thing that you have in common is that you're all in the same place. And so if you can anchor yourself like in that place by referencing it, then you're going to get off on the right foot. This is the reason why people that don't know each other talk about the weather, because the weather is a thing that everybody experiences, that's in a particular place. But you can be more specific with the weather, right? Because that's a little bit cliche. So, if you're in a class, if you're in my class, if we were doing this face to face, you could say, gosh, Adam is so witty, isn't he? That was a joke. But, that's a good way to be like, oh man, the 2 of us are talking, or the 3 or 4 of us are talking. And the one thing that we all have in common is this place that we're in, and that sort of fixes our attention on this, and it gets us off and running on a conversation. Say you're at an orientation for your first new job, and there's maybe 15 or 20 places, or 15 or 20 people there. You can reference the fact that you're there, and gosh, what an exciting day this is, or aren't you glad to be working for this place, or maybe I'm a little bit concerned about X, Y, and Z. And so we focus it on where we're all at. So think about anchoring, referencing the place that you're at. If you're at like a convention or a conference, you may say, do you come to these types of events often? Or this bus is always packed. If you're in a bad situation, like you're stuck at the airport and you're trying to make idle banter, you may commiserate and say, gosh, like Delta is always late, aren't they? Or something to that effect. So cool. The next one then, like once you've sort of fixed everybody's attention and we've gotten like sort of initial round of talking, then the next step is to reveal something about yourself. Because remember, we go from small talk to bigger talk by incrementally revealing things about ourselves that are more and more important, okay? And so this is a very superficial sort of reveal, but people appreciate the fact that you're sharing something, and it, they want to reciprocate usually. And then that's how you get a conversation started. And so you could say, in our example, Adam's so witty, isn't he? So glad to be in his class. You could say, I've been trying to get into Adam's class for 2 semesters now, but I finally got a spot, Or if you said you come to these types of, conferences often, you may say, I've never been before. And that's sort of an example of embracing ignorance, right? Because if you sort of talk about things that you don't know, then the implied thing that you're saying is that you want them to fill in your gaps, right? So if you say, I've never been to, the International Leaders Conference before, they may say, gives them an opening to say, oh, it's great, you'll really enjoy it. Be sure to check out X, Y, and Z. And, by you playing ignorant or, legitimately being ignorant, that gives them a chance to be the expert. And most people enjoy talking whenever they get to talk about a thing that they feel like they're the expert on. So the next step is, it was supposed to have started with an E, because remember, this was the R method. And I believe the E was encourage participation, not participate. But so just remember that it's encourage participation. And so this is when you have like follow-up questions, right? Are you enjoying the class? Have you ever seen this group before? If you're at like a concert or something, how many times have you been to this conference? So just like, some very superficial questions to sort of prompt them to get to share some information. And then once they do, because, most of the time they're not going to shut you down. They're not going to be like, look, I don't want to talk to you. Then you can go in with like some deeper questions, right? So if we're in the context of that conference and I have, sort of feigned ignorance about not really knowing, what's going to happen because I've not been here, very many times. And we put this person in the context of being the expert. I may say, well, tell me a little bit more about the speaker, or is the banquet food good? Or what's the best part about the city tour? Or, how did you feel about some X controversy that happened earlier today? What brought you to the conference originally? And then, why is always a good question because it, allows people to follow up. So these are a good one, a couple good ones. So remember that we have anchored by talking about like the place that we're in, because it's the one thing that we have in common. We've revealed something about ourselves, which makes people want to reciprocate and share something about themselves. And then once they have, then we've encouraged them to participate by going sort of deeper with, some follow-up questions, And that prevents you, the follow-up questions are good because it prevents you from having to come up with a new topic like right off the bat. And it's difficult to flip from topic to topic. But if you hit on one that they seem interested to share about, you can go deeper and ask them more questions about, get a lot of information and you get a lot of talking done. So anyway, some things that people tend to talk about in business settings, you can always talk about work, you can talk about shop, whatever your business is. And if you're talking to somebody else that knows the same business, there's a wealth of things to discuss there. If you know the person, vaguely, you can talk about home life and hobbies and stuff, or kids and family. With Simonson and Tummins, who are in the other fellows in my department here, I always ask them like what their kids are up to, because their kids have a better social life than I do. Like they do so many things. Like one of them's like curing a ham, and the other's like off playing like travel ball, and it's unreal. Like I don't know, these kids are cool. You can also talk about awards and achievements. It's a good way to sort of open a conversation. So say for example, that X company, sort of outsold everybody like in widgets. You may, bring that up in conversation and say like, oh, great job. I heard that you guys, cornered the market on X or whatever. It gives them something to brag about. Or if you've met somebody, at a conference that, won an award or maybe got to do a presentation or something, it just kind of gives you something to say, oh, hey, I know this thing about you and congratulations. So people generally appreciate that kind of thing. Cool. When we come back, we'll talk about how to make an exit gracefully, because that's the thing that people need to know how to do. Here I am awkwardly leaving. Still leaving.